From exploring an abandoned mining site, said to contain $3 billion worth of gold, to overcoming the numerous obstacles in their way as they journey toward the gold, here's how Parker Schnabel took over a $300 million bankrupt mine in Brazil. It looks like things are heating up. For many years now, Parker and his crew have been mining in the United States and Canada, doing their best to get their hands on that coveted gold. As the gold mining prodigy that he is, Parker isn't going to settle for this level of success. No, he wants more. Like any respectable gold prospector, Parker knew it was time to explore new fertile grounds for this precious metal, even if it meant traveling around the world to get exactly what he wanted. As a result, Parker found his way into the jungles deep within Brazil. It's interesting because while there may be a lot of gold to mine in Brazil, there also seems to be a lot of explosive conflict among those interested in mining activities. Nonetheless, this is a great opportunity to come away with a lot of gold, so Parker and his crew were compelled to at least explore the place. After all, Brazil could be the next location for the expansion of Parker's gold mining endeavors. They would just have to accept that it may be more dangerous than they had ever imagined. They even had to fit Parker for a bulletproof belt. This takes us back to a few weeks ago when Parker and his crew arrived in Brazil to investigate the gold mining activities there. Apparently, Brazil was experiencing its own recent gold rush, and Parker knew he just had to look into what was going on. Who could blame him? Just take a look at the massive gold nugget found in Brazil in the 1980s, the biggest gold nugget discovered in Cerrado, weighing around 60 kilos, about 130 to 135 pounds. A collector would probably pay a fortune for it at a big auction. Brazil was quite enticing to Parker because the country has spent the last few decades developing a billion-dollar industry that he just had to tap into. Apparently, millions of tons of gold were stolen from what is known as the Colossal tunnel. This was a big blow to the company that developed the mining site, as they had spent hundreds of millions of dollars on their mining activities. They're only to go bankrupt in the end. Probably one of the worst investments ever. Colossal, a big mining company, spent $300 million developing that mine site and then went bankrupt after a long drive. Parker and his crew arrived at the mine only to find it barricaded and sealed off. Not wanting to give up, Parker and his team tried to get some information about the mines from the local miners who must have worked there when it was still operating. To their dismay, they found out that these local miners had been guarding the mines ever since they were sealed almost a decade ago. It turns out they felt they had been robbed by the owners of the mines and had sealed the place off so that no one could go in. As Parker and his crew found themselves in this strange situation, they did what they could to negotiate with the miners to gain access to the mines. Unfortunately, all their pleas to enter fell on deaf ears, even when they only wanted to take a peek at what was left inside the mine. However, one of the elderly miners, although reluctant, decided to intercede on their behalf to see if the other miners would grant them access. With any luck, this would allow Part to see where the owners of Colossal Minerals made their mistakes, ensuring that they wouldn't repeat them if they got to work in these mines. There must be a huge opportunity waiting for them in these mines, and hopefully the miners would let them in without a fuss. To their relief, the miners granted their request, albeit with a condition: they could only go in with one of their cars. The team followed their leader as they made their way through the property, which reminded them of an old Soviet Union camp. They were fascinated by the tale of the activities of these miners back in the day, especially as the miners claimed they were never able to get any gold out of the mines. Despite the worries, Parker and his crew couldn't help but admire the old buildings on the mine site. The place looked very sketchy, almost like a scene from a zombie apocalypse, but they were eager to explore further and learn more about what had happened to those who worked there back in the day. Parker and his team thought it might be best to explore the abandoned buildings. They hoped to investigate the tunnel that could be found beneath the pit The place had an eerie atmosphere as they navigated through the area. It definitely didn't have good vibes. Soon Danny and Diego came across an abandoned processing site, eager to see if they could find any signs of gold processing. They decided to explore the building. After all, nobody would invest $300 million into a place without expecting returns, and this would be the first place one would think to check for clues of mining activities. Unfortunately, the pair realized they would need something to protect themselves while entering the building. The site was now occupied by bats, and their droppings were everywhere. It was unsafe to inhale the fumes, so Danny and Diego decided to put on face masks before continuing their exploration of the processing building. As they re-entered the building, they were shocked by what they found. Wary Danny pulled out his pocket knife. After all, you can never be sure you're safe in a place like that. Meanwhile, Parker and Lisa were having a discussion at another part of the mining site. They had come across a building that made them theorize about what might have taken place there in the past. Upon discovering some foundational pillars, they speculated that this place may have been used to process gold, possibly housing crusher circuits, conveyors, and mills. Parker was certain that Colossus had almost completed their crushers before going bankrupt. Based on photos he had seen, the images showed that Colossus had indeed invested a significant amount of money into constructing this massive structure. This likely accounted for a large portion of the $300 million spent. Colossus must have been proud of their massive rock-crushing mill, cyanide processing plant, and gold room. Impressive structures that now stood abandoned. However, the site had deteriorated into a place exped for parts. As Parker and Lisa continued exploring the site, they found it truly deserted. The markings on the walls suggested a post-apocalyptic scene with symbols associated with the mafia and other underground elements found in Brazil. These markings indicated the presence of organized crime groups involved in illegal gold smuggling, clearly marking their territory to deter anyone from taking over. Meanwhile, Danny and Diego discovered that the shocking sight in the abandoned building was the carcass of a decaying animal with bats flying everywhere. They admitted this was one of the spookiest places they had ever been. Unfortunately, they couldn't determine if any gold had ever been processed in the building, as they lacked the tools to investigate further. The place was so eerie that they were just glad some ghost or phantom didn't attack them like in a horror movie. Eventually, the pair reached the tunnel. Once both groups reported their finding, they decided their next course of action was to explore the tunnels and see what might be hidden within the dark, mysterious cave. Promised to be as exciting as they imagined. The group started wondering if this was where the miners used to transport their gold back in the day. Despite their enthusiasm, they knew they would need evidence to prove that any gold was ever found there. The team believed in the existence of a gold vein due to the accounts they had received before arriving at this mysterious site. Apparently, the gold miners had dug up millions of dollars worth of gold by hand from the infamous gold vein. Unfortunately, this came to an end when a flood prevented the miners from accessing the gold-rich area, which is estimated to contain $3 billion worth of gold. Eager to uncover this treasure, Parker and his team knew they had to reach the end of the tunnel to confirm whether there was any gold in the area. However, their adventure came to a sudden halt when they encountered flood waters within the tunnel. Parker realized that further research was necessary to understand what had happened to the tunnel and the gold that was supposed to be there. Colossus had spent close to $250 million building this site, and it didn't make sense that they would do so if there was no gold in the area. It also didn't make sense that they would invest so much money only to abandon the project When it was nearly complete eventually, the team reached the other side of the tunnel where they noticed a massive structure that immediately caught their attention. Although they couldn't determine exactly what it was, they decided to climb to the top of it once there. Danny suggested that one of them should scuba dive into the water underneath to try and collect a sample from the wall.